Hi, this is Deboki, and today I'm going to be talking about The Vegetarian by Han Kang, which was originally published in Korean and translated into English by Deborah Smith. The Vegetarian is a novel that is made up of 3 parts that documents the story of Young-hee, a Korean housewife who decides to become vegetarian after a series of disturbing and violent dreams. Each part covers her story from 3 different perspectives at 3 different points in time. In the first point, we're hearing the story from the point of view of her husband, right when she decides to become vegetarian. The second part starts sometime after that from the point of view of her sister's husband, and then the third part takes place even further along from the point of view of her sister. If you're a person who follows books, I think even loosely, you've probably heard about The Vegetarian because it won the Man Booker Prize in 2016. And honestly, that didn't really bear too much on my expectations for this book because, like I've mentioned before, literary fiction is not a genre that I am great at. I don't really do well with ambiguity. I don't really do well with character-driven stories. I really like my stories to be plot-driven, to be concrete. I like to know why things are happening and for there to be very definitive endings. And while there's probably plenty of literary fiction that does that, my experience has been that much of it does not. My needs are usually better met by genre fiction. I think this is part of why I love romance and YA and sci-fi and fantasy. So honestly, the main reason I actually decided to read this book is because my husband is vegan and I was kind of just curious based on the title if this would be a book that he might be interested in. With all of that said, with all of that initial hesitation, I loved this book. I don't know if I'm getting to a place where I am starting to finally kind of get it with it when it comes to ambiguous character-driven stories. This is a feeling that I kind of had coming out of Queen of the Night, where I was like, actually, I like this book so much more than I thought I would. I feel like The Vegetarian is a book that like 2 or 3 years ago I would have found really frustrating, but somehow right now it worked for me. It's not a book that's going to tell you entirely what it's about. It's not going to tell you exactly what is happening, and instead it invites you in to kind of project your own understanding, your own ideas about things like domestic life, the male gaze, food choices, the body, especially the female body, kind of onto the story and the events of the story, as well as what you can see of the characters. And I think it invites you to do all of that and see how your own conceptions really stack up against what's happening in the book. The first part, told from Young-hee's husband's point of view, really reminded me a lot of the short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And the short story is about a young married woman who's kind of paranoia starts to manifest in really unsettling concerns about the wallpaper in her room. And her husband is sort of kind of watching this and does not completely understand what's happening. And while there are definitely differences between the husband and wife in that story and the husband and wife in The Vegetarian, I think there's a similar sense of unease connected to domestic life and specific domestic acts. There's that unease that starts with both of these works that only starts to grow stronger and stronger, and in The Vegetarian it starts to manifest in this really clear disconnect in voice between Young-hee and her husband, as you start to realize that they're regarding the same disturbing events with disturbingly different points of view. I expected the other parts to kind of continue on with these same ideas and themes, and I was kind of surprised because each part actually feels very distinct from one another, not just because of the shifts of like the narrative point of view, but also the use of the first person versus third person narration, as well as changes in the use of tense when you're going from one part to another. The last part, which is told from Young-hee's sister's point of view, was really the most interesting to me kind of inherently because it's the only chapter that comes from a non-male point of view. In contrast to this last part, the first 2 parts, which are Young-hee's husband and her brother-in-law, they really reinforce a sense of the male gaze, but they also kind of illustrate the blindness of the male gaze to each other, as well as an understanding of how distinct their expectations of women can be, even if the basic act of objectification is the same. Young-hee's sister, on the other hand, felt like the glue that helped to really coalesce some sense of what is going on with Young-hee, what it is that she is maybe experiencing. It's not that In-hee is faultless or completely understands her sister, but she does seem to question her understanding of Young-hee more than the men, who have really like kind of strictly viewed Young-hee through a specific lens that they've chosen for her. And yet, with all that said, there are very clear holes in In-hee's understanding of her sister that keeps us as the reader in the dark as well. What I think I ended up kind of projecting the most onto this book and Young-hee, and that I didn't really expect, was that part of depression where you really want to disentangle yourself from the world. Not necessarily in an abrupt, violent way, but just in a way where you are of the world without really having to participate in it. Young-hee's decision to stop eating meat disrupts both her physicality and her connections with her family. And the consequences from this choice carries on through the story. All around her, all the people are trying to fix something that they don't understand. And as the efforts to take care of Young-hee become more and more intense, she reacts in equal measure to try and achieve that separation that she's seeking. That dynamic really speaks to how difficult it is to separate yourself from the relationships you have with people. So while the book is not about being vegetarian, and I think it's important to note that you can become vegetarian or vegan without kind of serious ramifications for your physical or mental health, I do find it interesting how central food choice is, to the point that it's the title of the book. Food is central to our interactions with our own body and with each other. It's a choice that is both personal and social. That's why even in real life, even if things don't get as intense as they do in this book, the topic of being vegetarian or vegan can become really fraught with the sense of judgment or ideas about culture and privilege and wealth. Reading this book kind of reminded me of the surprise that people feel when they hear that my husband is vegan and that I'm not. Particularly when people start to wonder, like, is he judgmental of it? No, he's not. Or when they tell me, like, oh, I could never date a vegan person. Side note, dating a vegan person is great because you don't have to share your food. This is a book that I will be thinking about for a long time, and I think if I pick it up in a few years, it will probably hit me in a different way. If you've been like kind of wondering if you should read it and kind of considering it, I would recommend at least checking it out, because at the very least, it's not a very long book. I think it's less than 200 pages, so I feel like the worst that happens is you make it 20 pages in, you're already 10% of the way through the book, and you can figure out pretty quickly if it's the kind of book you want to read. I really enjoyed this book, so I am really glad that I took a chance on it. So thank you for watching. Let me know if you read the book, what you thought about it. Have there been any other books that turned you on to literary fiction? If you want to talk more about books with me outside of this channel, you can follow me on Goodreads at okidokiboki or on Twitter at okidoki_boki. And yeah,